I know you are out there. You're listening. You're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I can't see the future. I'm not here to tell you how this is going to end. I'm here to tell you how this is going to begin. I'm going to start this broadcast, and when I do, I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without controls and boundaries. A world where anything is possible. In the Unsolved Murder of Seth Rich Part 1, we learn that Seth Rich was a 27-year-old DNC staffer from Omaha, Nebraska. He was found murdered with 2 gunshot wounds to his back. When police arrived, he was reportedly still alive, found with his wallet, his money, and his watch still on his person. Shortly after Rich was murdered, about 10 days, the DNC leaks were released by WikiLeaks. The DNC leaks included roughly 20,000 emails and over 8,000 internal memos and documents, which exposed that the DNC, among other things, favored Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders during the 2016 presidential primary. As fallout, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the head of the DNC, resigned embarrassingly on the eve of the Democratic National Convention. Shortly after that, Julian Assange, the founder and CEO of WikiLeaks, went on Dutch television and implied that Seth Rich was a WikiLeaks source and that he had been murdered as a result of his connections to WikiLeaks. Let me adjust this light. There you go. After Assange went on to the Dutch television and implied that Rich had been murdered due to connections to WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks released a $20,000 reward for anyone who could provide information that would lead to the conviction in the murder of Seth Rich. Months after that, WikiLeaks released another document dump, which were private direct messages between Robin Young, who was a Playboy model from the 1980s, and alleged Russian hacker Guccifer 2.0. In those private direct messages, we learned that Robin Young and Guccifer 2.0 had developed somewhat of an intimate relationship. If you read the 15 pages of direct messages, you could see they talk dirty to each other, they talk about intimate details of their lives, and Guccifer 2.0 tells Robin Young that Seth Rich was the WikiLeaks source. That was our conclusion of Part 1. Not proof, but certainly enough smoke for an investigation, and that's all we asked for, that the Department of Justice does a real investigation into the murder of Seth Rich. On May 16th, Rod Wheeler, a private investigator, went on Fox 5 in Washington, D.C., and told the news station that he had proof from a source inside the FBI that Seth Rich was in fact in contact with WikiLeaks prior to his murder. That set off a firestorm. One day later, an anonymous source, which I never like to go with, goes on to the same Fox News affiliate and tells them that he could confirm that Seth Rich was in contact with WikiLeaks. I put off the anonymous source. You can look up the Unsolved Murder of Seth Rich Part 2 for the details on that. We looked into Rod Wheeler. It turned out Rod Wheeler is not paid by the family, which he wasn't lying about. He is paid for by a businessman in Texas. Let me just get the name correct here. Ed Butowski. Ed Butowski is a very successful money manager who, according to Ed, contacted the family when he heard about the Rich murder through the Jewish community in Omaha, Nebraska. In this video, we're going to take a deeper look because there's been a lot of people asking about it. We already looked at Wheeler. We already looked at Butowski. The other major players who are surrounding the family are, and let me just get this right, I want to get the names right, Brad Bowman and Jack Berkman. Bowman I only recently came across, although he's been in the picture for quite a while. And Jack Berkman I did come across in my original research, and he's certainly an interesting player in this whole situation as well. So let's take a look at the four main people who have really injected themselves into the murder investigation of Seth Rich. The four men we're going to discuss today are Brad Bowman, pictured on your right. Jack Berkman can be seen here. Ed Butowski, and Rod Wheeler, who can be seen here. The first person to inject themselves into the Seth Rich murder investigation was Brad Bowman. We found out about his involvement on August 11, 2016, when WikiLeaks tweeted, Seth Rich's new quote-unquote family spokesman is Brad Bowman, a professional Democrat crisis PR consultant with the Pastorum Group. The following is a media release from January 21st, 2016, titled, Communications in Washington, D.C. just got a lot more interesting with the launch of the Pastorum Group. Washington, D.C., the Pastorum Group, TPG, a new full-service communications firm working for progressive candidates, clients, and causes, opened its door in Washington, D.C. today. Founded by Josh Cohen, a campaign veteran who has previously worked at SEIU, the Democratic National Committee, and Obama for America, and Brad Bowman, former executive director of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who brings over 15 years of campaign and crisis communications experience. TPG will bring aggressive and creative solutions to today's political and legislative fights. In addition to Cohen and Bowman, TPG is proud to launch with Tori Brown, principal at the firm who had previously worked for Media Matters and in the public interest, where she fought against government privatization schemes in the states, and managing principal Michelle Coyle, who brings over a decade of political consulting and business management at firms like Rising Tide Interactive, where she served as vice president. For nearly a decade, I have had the honor of working on some of the biggest fights in American politics, whether it's winning back the Senate in 2006, helping elect Barack Obama in 2008, or defending the president's historic agreement to prevent nuclear Iran. I am excited to take that experience and those lessons learned and help our clients win, said Josh Cohen, co-founder and partner at the Pastorum Group. Progressive politics is my passion. It is more than just my life's work. To have an opportunity to take my years of organization and communications and put them to work for clients who are having a direct impact, making the lives for Americans from coast to coast better, is both an honor and a pleasure, said Brad Bowman, co-founder and partner of the Pastorum Group. Working with progressive candidates, advocacy groups, and nonprofits who fight to make life a little better for all Americans is a true honor. TPG is uniquely situated to help these groups maximize their budgets with creative and innovative communication strategies that cut through the clutter and make a direct impact, said Michelle Coyle, managing principal with Pastorum Group. The Pastorum Group is a full-service communications and political strategy firm specializing in crisis operations, strategic planning, digital engagement, media relations, and coalition building for progressive clients. TPG leverages our experience and deep ties with the progressive community and elected officials to create meaningful social change. The January 2016 press release confirmed that Brad Bowman is in fact a major Democratic Party crisis management player. It also revealed that he worked for the SEIU. According to the Wall Street Journal, in an article from November 1st, 2012, titled Union is Top Spender for Democrats, the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, has emerged as the top outside spender on Democratic campaigns this year, surpassing even President Barack Obama's main super PAC. SEIU, like other large entities that spend money on elections, doesn't have to disclose all of its expenditures to the Federal Elections Commission. But according to disclosures it has made so far, the union has funded almost $70 million of campaign donations, television ads, and get-out-the-vote efforts for Mr. Obama and other Democrats. And scroll down a little bit, we can see a chart which shows $69 million spent by SEIU on the Barack Obama 2012 presidential campaign. Thanks to another tweet from WikiLeaks, we learned just how early that Brad Bowman inserted himself into the Seth Rich murder investigation. Looking into Bowman, we learned that he was one of the co-founders of the Patorum Group, a group who specializes in Democratic Party crisis management handling. We also learned that Bowman has a long history of being a Democratic Party operative and worked for SEIU, a group that spent at least $70 million to get President Barack Obama elected back in 2012. The next person we'll take a look into is Republican lobbyist Jack Berkman, who, like Bowman, inserted himself into the investigation. This, according to The Hill, in an article written on September 14th, 2016, GOP lobbyist, they're referring to Jack Berkman, offers $100,000 reward for info in DNC staffer's death. A Republican lobbyist says he's offering a $100,000 reward for information relating to the death of Democratic National Committee staffer over the summer. Jack Berkman of Berkman & Associates said Wednesday that he hopes the money will help clear up what happened surrounding the shooting death of DNC staffer Seth Rich in July. There are too many dimensions to the tragedy, and none of them make any sense. I hope that $100,000 in additional money will finally get to the truth of what happened here and will either debunk the conspiracy theories or validate them, Berkman said in a press release. But for the sake of Mr. Rich's parents, family, friends, and co-workers, and the DC community at large, the murder needs to be solved, and those responsible held accountable, he said. Here, I'm going to show you a clip of Mr. Berkman in a press conference with Seth Rich's parents.
First off, I would just like to say thank you so much, because Seth believed, one, that America was absolutely great, and two, what makes America great is its people. And he believed that any problem we ever had, if we would work together as equal human beings, we could solve our problems. And for my family, I just have to say thank you so much. He knows nothing about us. He didn't know Seth, and he's a Republican. And here he is stepping up to help my son, who is a Democrat. And this Seth is smiling with the bright sun shining down on us. This is people coming together to help solve a problem.
On its face, everything we just saw from Jack Berkman seems to have good intentions, be pure of heart. Jack Berkman saw a grieving family who had just lost their 27-year-old son to a brutal murder by gunshot on the streets of Washington, D.C. In order to help, Berkman contacts the family, offers $100,000 of his own money, and holds a public press conference to bring awareness to the Seth Rich murder. And it did appear to be pure until shortly after that, Berkman held an interview on Fox News in which he made very strange claims involving anonymous sources and Russian conspiracies. Take a look here.
But this morning, a possible break in the case. Republican lobbyist Jack Berkman, who's put up reward money in this case, says he has new evidence linking Rich's murder to Rich's discovery that Russian operatives had hacked the DNC.
All right, Jack joins us live in the studio with more this morning. Good to see you once again. All right, break down.
It's like a spy novel.
Yes, exactly.
It does. I wish I had. It's kind of a morbid subject, but it's a hopeful subject because finally some progress, and it's my job to bring closure to the family. That's what I'm trying to do. You get a lot of crank calls in this type of role. I've done this sort of stuff before. It's just part of the job. But I think I have something credible here. Was approached by a guy who styles himself as a former U.S. intel officer. I quizzed him. I think he's credible. You never know motive of people. But what he said is basically this, that Seth discovered that the Russians had been hacking, and therefore the Russian government did away with Seth. Now, one of the things that, just like you, I have to judge credibility of people telling me these things. The timeline would seem to match. Seth was killed in July. The story about Russia hacking into the DNC and possibly other places happened in August. The timeline matches.
For seemingly the millionth time in the last political year, we have heard someone make claims of an anonymous source claiming a crime by Russians against the United States of America. According to Jack Berkman, an anonymous source told him that Seth Rich had actually discovered Russian hacking and was going to expose it, and in order to silence him, the Russians had Seth Rich murdered. Quite a claim. Let's take a look into Jack Berkman and what he's done in his career. According to JackBerkmanRadio.com, Jack Berkman is one of America's leading national radio talk show hosts. He also owns and operates one of Washington's most prominent lobbying firms. His radio show, Behind the Curtain, is the only talk show in the world hosted by a registered lobbyist. Berkman releases constantly information not heretofore available to American talk media audiences. Information from the bowels of Washington, D.C., as only a quintessential insider could do. Now, for the first time in the history of American media, the average man could see and understand Washington just as the power brokers do. According to OpenSecrets.org, Center for Responsive Politics, J.K. Berkman and Associates took in over $1.5 million in the 2016 financial year. As you can see, this is a list of the many agencies that he lobbied for, different causes that he lobbied for, with some very big bills, $35,000, $25,000, $40,000. J.K. Berkman and Associates does very well, and if we scroll up here, annual lobbying by J.M. Berkman and Associates, and we could start at 2013, over $3 million, 2014, over $2.4 million, 2015, just under $1.6 million, 2016, as we said, over $1.5 million, and so far in 2017, I am making this video on May 26th, they have taken in, looks like a little over $400,000 to this point. According to thepublicityagency.com, Jack Berkman is a top lobbyist. Jack Berkman, founder and president of J.M. Berkman and Associates, LLC, the #1 lobbying firm in D.C., according to The Hill, is a Washington, D.C.-based political consultant and syndicated radio talk show host. In May 2016, he announced the first fundraising event for Donald Trump for president, hosted by him and his wife in Arlington, Virginia, to coalesce D.C. lobbyists and government contractors. However, the event was abruptly canceled after Berkman received what he considered a bullying letter from attorneys from the for-profit Trump organization. Berkman quickly went from a would-be supporter to a leader and organizer of the anti-Trump movement. On July 8, 2016, Berkman hosted a fundraiser for Free the Delegates, in which 500 people attended and where he raised over $500,000 for the anti-Trump effort, with even more events and fundraisers planned. In July of 2016, Berkman put up the $100,000 reward to help solve the murder of Seth Rich. Finally, this according to the International Business Times, an article written on February 25th, 2014, Meet Jack Berkman, the Republican lobbyist trying to ban gay players from the NFL. One Republican lobbyist says he's busy working on legislation that would ban openly gay athletes from playing in the National Football League. According to him, it's all about stopping America from sliding into moral degeneracy. Jack Berkman, CEO of Berkman LLC and a self-described premier political consultant, announced on Monday that he's working on a bill to ban gay athletes from the NFL after Missouri defensive end Michael Sam came out as gay. If Sam is selected in April's NFL draft, he could become the league's first ever openly gay player, a prospect that apparently horrifies Berkman. Quote, I felt that if the NFL doesn't have any morals and people like NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, who are just get along guys, just want to appease advertisers, appease corporate America and all that stuff, Berkman told the Huffington Post, I figured, well, it is time for conservatives in Congress to step in and define morality for them. In summary, we learned that Jack Berkman injected himself into the Seth Rich murder investigation by generously donating $100,000 of his own money to help the family of Seth Rich find his murderer. Berkman was quick to go on national television and proclaim that an anonymous source told him that Seth Rich had actually discovered Russian hacking and was going to expose it, and because of that, the Russians killed Seth Rich. Interesting story. Looking into Jack Berkman, we learn that he is a powerful Washington, D.C. lobbyist. According to his own proclamations, the #1 firm in D.C. Berkman's made millions of dollars in the years 2013, 14, 15, and 16. During the lead up to President Trump's presidential election run, Berkman was first for President Trump, then he felt that he had been slighted by the Trump campaign, and he became a leading voice in the push to block President Trump from getting the Republican nomination for president. We also learned that Berkman previously campaigned to have gay NFL players completely banned from the NFL. I'll let you judge that for yourself. Now let's go to Rod Wheeler. I first came across Wheeler when he went on national television himself to make a rebuttal to what Jack Berkman had previously proclaimed.
Well, part of the help the Rich family needs is coming from our next guest, Rod Wheeler. He's a former D.C. homicide detective and Fox 5 News contributor who's now working with Seth Rich's family. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Allison.
Let me just ask you this. Why so few leads in this case?
Right. The police don't have, I don't think the police right now, the detectives have a clue in terms of who caused the death of Seth Rich. And I think that's one reason, Allison, why the family has engaged me and my company to help the police look into this a little bit more, try to come up with more evidence, try to find witnesses, because they really just don't have a clue.
And what is your role in this investigation, and what did the family ask of you?
Right. They just wanted me to kind of, because I am familiar with D.C. and, been a previous D.C. homicide detective, they just wanted me to kind of look into the case a little bit more, see if I can develop some leads, interview some people, which I've been doing over the past 3 weeks. And what's really interesting, since I've been looking into this case, I've uncovered quite a few things, but not necessarily related to Seth's death, but related to a possible underground corruption, organized crime, corruption group that may be operating in the district. Because I've started looking at other homicides and deaths that were called homicide or called accidental deaths, but could have been homicide. So this case, Allison, may actually open up a can of worms as far as what's been going on here in D.C. What I don't think it's related to, though, Allison, is this Russian hacking.
Okay, let's talk about that.
I think you were going to ask me about that.
Let's talk about that, because Jack Berkman has sat on the same couch and said that the family has asked him to look into the death of their son, Seth, and has also said that he has found connections with, from a former CIA person, I believe, with Russia and all this. And the WikiLeaks reward money is involved with that, more than $120,000 too, because they say they're hinting at the fact that perhaps Seth Rich may have given some documents.
Sure.
So help us parse all this out.
Well, a lot of people have made that same observation, and you have to ask yourself, what is the motivation behind a person wanting to get involved and offer reward money? Maybe he's just a good guy and he has a lot of money laying around, so this is how he wants to spend his money. But you have to be careful, though, when you start throwing out these conspiracy theories. They actually don't help the investigation at all. If you have a guy who's in the Army, and I think that's what Berkman said, he knew some guy in the CIA or the Army who had information, okay, then that guy needs to be talking to the police detective, not Jack Berkman. You know what I mean?
Did the family talk to Berkman? Do you know how this relationship came about?
I think they have had some discussions with him.
Okay.
But I can tell you and the viewers that I don't think Berkman is officially a representative of the family. Now, the family have their own spokesperson, right? But you have to be careful with throwing out these theories. I haven't found one shred of evidence at all that indicates that Seth's death is the result of any Russian hacking or anything like that. I do think it's possible, and I underline the word possible, that it could have been related to his job to some degree or relationships with the job. Don't know that for sure, but as investigators, we have to go down every path until we can determine who was responsible for his death.
Clearly, Rod Wheeler is suspicious of Jack Berkman's involvement in the Seth Rich murder investigation. And 2 months after the interview that you just saw, Rod Wheeler would go back on Fox News and make bombshell claims.
investigation.
The police department nor the FBI has been forthcoming. They haven't been cooperating at all. I believe that the answer to solving his death lies on that computer, which I believe is either at the police department or either at the FBI. I've been told both.
But you have sources at the FBI saying that there is information
For
that
sure.
could link Seth Rich to WikiLeaks?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's confirmed. Actually, I have a source inside the police department that has looked at me straight in the eye and said, Rod, we were told to stand down in this case, and I can't share any information with you. Now, that's highly unusual for a murder investigation, especially from a police department. Again, I don't think it comes from the chief's office, but I do believe there is a correlation between the mayor's office and the DNC, and that's the information that's going to come out tomorrow.
Private investigator Rod Wheeler went on national television and made some bombshell claims. He claimed that it was not clear whether the FBI or the police department had Seth Rich's computer, something I have not been able to determine to this point. He claimed that he had sources within the FBI that confirmed to him that Seth Rich was in fact a WikiLeaks source, or at least in communication with WikiLeaks. And he claimed that he was told by a member of the police department that the police department was told to stand down from investigating the Seth Rich WikiLeaks connections. Finally, he said that the next day, another source would corroborate those claims. Fox News would report on that anonymous source the next day.
And today, Fox News reported a federal anonymous source maintained the FBI produced a forensic report of Rich's computer within 96 hours of his murder, showing Seth Rich made contact with WikiLeaks through Gavin McFadden, a filmmaker and director of WikiLeaks who died 3 months after Rich's homicide. The federal source also told Fox News there were roughly 44,000 emails and more than 17,000 attachments from the DNC that Rich transferred to McFadden between January of 2015 and May of 2016.
In this political climate, I never like to go with anonymous sources. There's too much disinformation that try to put out pieces of false information so then that could be debunked, and the political parties claim, oh, the whole story's debunked, look away, nothing to see here. Because it's such a big story and Rod Wheeler did initially break it, let's take a look at the claim that Gavin McFadden was Seth Rich's WikiLeaks source. This, according to WorldNet Daily, WikiLeaks director Gavin McFadden dies. WikiLeaks director and founder of the Center for Investigative Journalism, Gavin McFadden, has died at age 76. It is understood the American journalist died of lung cancer surrounded by loved ones in London on Saturday, that's October 22nd, 2016. Colleagues and fellow journalists across the world, including WikiLeaks co-founder Julian Assange, have taken to social media to pay their respects. In his illustrious career, McFadden produced and directed more than 50 documentaries on a wide range of topics, including neo-Nazis, child labor, the Iraq arms trade, and Frank Sinatra's ties to the mafia. After Rod Wheeler went on Fox News and made bombshell claims that there is proof that Seth Rich was in fact the WikiLeaks source, questions arose to who pays Rod Wheeler. We were able to get to the bottom of that, and that will take us to our fourth and final character who injected themselves into the Seth Rich murder investigation. Let's take a look.
And Tony, 24 hours after we first reported breaking allegations made by a private investigator hired by Seth Rich's family, we are breaking down questions that have been asked and those that remain unanswered. Rod Wheeler is a former MPD detective and a Fox News contributor, and for the past 30 days, he has been running a parallel investigation into Seth Rich's murder. Today, the Rich family confirmed the association with Wheeler, saying in part, quote, the services of the private investigator who spoke to press was offered to the Rich family and paid for by a third party and contractually was barred from speaking to press or anyone outside of law enforcement or the family unless explicitly authorized by the family. Fox News confirms the Rich family is named as clients of Wheeler's capital investigations on a contract signed by Joel Rich, that's Seth Rich's father. The family spokesperson confirmed today that Ed Batowski, a businessman from Texas, is the third party financing Wheeler's services, and said this evening, quote, Ed has spent the past 6 months cultivating a relationship with the Rich family, grooming them and pushing them on the idea of an independent investigation. He personally introduced them to the investigator and said he would pay for his services, and he claims by him that he wasn't personally and intimately involved in this is an outright lie.
Brad Bowman, the Democratic Party crisis management consultant who was assigned to the Seth Rich family early on, as we learned through WikiLeaks, was quick to release a statement disavowing Rod Wheeler's investigation. We also learned that Rod Wheeler was paid for by Ed Batowski, a Texas businessman. Let's take a look into Batowski. According to edbatowski.com, his official webpage, Ed Batowski is a managing partner at Chapwood Capital Investment Management. Ed Batowski is an internationally recognized expert in the investment wealth management industry. Ed has a unique ability to combine the current political environment with how it affects investment portfolios. Batowski has been in the financial service industry for 25 years. It started his career with Morgan Stanley and was a senior vice president in private wealth management. In his 18 years at Morgan Stanley, he was the firm's top producer nationally, as well as the first advisor to surpass $1 billion in assets under management. He was also recognized as a member of both the Chairman's Club and the Equity Club, a distinction reserved for only the top advisors at Morgan Stanley. Through his work with professional athletes, Batowski was recently featured in the Sports Illustrated article, How Athletes Go Broke. This article to date is the most popular article in Sports Illustrated history. Additionally, Ed was featured in the film Broke, an ESPN 30 for 30 documentary chronicling professional athletes and their monetary experiences. He is a frequent guest on CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNBC, Fox Business News, Fox News Channel, Bloomberg TV, and China TV. Batowski would go on David Webb's radio show to clarify his role in the Seth Rich murder investigation.
I'll just bring him on. So let's bring my friend Ed Batowski on to talk about this. Ed, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for giving me an opportunity and your interest in this, because it's really it's the media at its worst, I think.
All right, so you just heard Rod explain on Hannity his involvement. Rod Wheeler, who we both know over at Fox. As a good Samaritan, you got involved in this. Expand on that.
Sure. So one day, and people always hear different things, and one day someone came up to me, just somebody I didn't know very well, and said, hey, I heard something about this young guy, Seth Rich, and why he was murdered. And the person just offered it up to me, and I just found it very interesting, and I couldn't get it out of my mind, because here I was, a father of a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old, and could only imagine what it would be like to have a child murdered. And it just killed me to hear about this. So as I looked into it more, I thought, you know what, I shouldn't know this. And I don't even know if it was true or not, but I looked at some headlines and I realized that the parents were not getting any answers. And I thought, well, somehow I should just tell the parents, because I shouldn't know something, because if it's true, they should know, not me. So I actually went on, maybe you're going to find this funny, but I knew the family was Jewish. I'm Jewish. I went on Facebook and I said, do any of my Facebook friends know anybody Jewish in Nebraska and or in Omaha? And I got a lot of answers. So apparently there's a lot of Jews in Omaha. And I said to this one gentleman, do you know this family? He said yes. And I said, could you make an introduction? I just wanted to share something with them. So when I spoke to Mr. Rich and Mrs. Rich, I shared with them what I had heard. It wasn't a big deal or not, but I just didn't feel right having known it or heard it and not shared it with them. And then I said, you know, how is this going? He says, Ed, we're not getting any answers at all. We know nothing. No one's talking to us. No one's communicating with us. They said they would keep us updated, and it's been crickets. And I said, well, maybe you should hire somebody to work for you, like a private detective. And they said, well, that would be amazing, but we just don't have the money to do it. And at that moment, I thought, you know what, I'm going to help these people out. So I said, listen, I will be happy to foot the bill. And in my back of my mind, I'm thinking, I have no idea how much these people cost, but I hope it's not a fortune because I'm not a real rich guy. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to help these people out because somehow these people need to know what happened to their little boy. And I offered it up. I said, let me see if I can find someone. I actually found Rod Wheeler because he's got a great reputation. They negotiated something between them. And I said, any bills at all, I would pay for. They put it in a contract that said any bills Ed Butowski would pay, which is completely accurate. And that was the end of it. They put it in the contract to make sure that, the family wasn't going to be held liable for it. And that's it. Next thing you know, I'm like in, weird things start happening, David. But that is what happened. And that's how I got involved, simply trying to help a man and a lady find out who killed their son.
Since Rod Wheeler went on Fox News and made bombshell claims regarding Seth Rich's connections to WikiLeaks, Texas businessman Ed Butowski and Democratic PR specialist Brad Bowman have been thrust into the public spotlight. WorldNet Daily reached out to both parties for comment. Here is the transcript of their conversation with Brad Bowman. This from WorldNet Daily, titled, "That's Patently False. Seth Rich family spokesman denies DNC is paying him." Scroll down. Brad Bowman, a professional Democratic crisis public relations consultant who has frequently criticized President Trump, abruptly ended a call with WorldNet Daily when asked about his connections to the DNC. "That's a patently 100% false," he shouted when asked if he was hired by the DNC just before disconnecting the call. Bowman refused to indicate who is paying his salary. To this point, it is still not clear who pays Brad Bowman. Let's take a look deeper into the article to find out what else Bowman told WorldNet Daily and what else Ed Butowski, Texas businessman, told WorldNet Daily. This from the same WorldNet Daily article. Despite Bowman's statement to the contrary, a Texas businessman who hired a private eye to look into Rich's murder told WorldNet Daily that the DNC assigned Bowman to represent the Rich family. Ed Butowski, a wealth management and financial advisor, said the Rich family asked him to assistance in stopping top DC lobbyist Jack Berkman from representing himself to the media as their spokesman. Berkman, founder and president of J.M. Berkman and Associates, the top lobbyist firm in D.C., with thousands of clients, has offered a $105,000 reward for anyone who has information about Rich's death. Berkman has repeatedly claimed Russia is responsible for Rich's murder. Joe Rich, Seth's father, allegedly asked Butowski to push back against Berkman's interference. "The third time I talked to Mr. Rich, he said, 'Ed, there is a guy named Berkman who keeps saying he represents us. I am going to give you his phone number. Please tell him to stop doing that.' We have a man who was assigned to us by the DNC," Butowski explained to WorldNet Daily. According to Butowski, Joe Rich added, "We were assigned a guy named Brad Bowman. I don't know why we were assigned him. I have no idea why I need somebody to speak for me, but please tell Berkman, because he is not listening to me, to go away and stop acting like he speaks for us." Joe Rich's exact words were, "The DNC assigned us to Butowski." Butowski said he has never spoken to Berkman, but all I know is that Mr. Rich didn't like him, that he wouldn't listen, and kept making stuff up. In an interview with WorldNet Daily on May 16th, Bowman, so we're going back to Brad Bowman now, explained that he was put in touch with Rich's family by two of Rich's friends, both of whom worked for the DNC, and that the family requested help because they had more media requests than they could handle. Bowman also claimed that Rich's family is devastated that a private eye, former DC police homicide detective Rod Wheeler, hasn't ruled out the possibility that Rich had ties to WikiLeaks. The Rich family was not upset about Wheeler's progress in the investigation, Butowski told WorldNet Daily on Tuesday. In fact, the family commended Detective Wheeler for uncovering new information related to Rich's murder just hours before the story went viral in the news media, Butowski said. Suddenly their tone changed after Bowman intervened, Butowski said. They had heard Rich was possibly linked to WikiLeaks for almost 8 months. There is nothing outrageous here, he said. The night before the story broke about Rich's involvement with WikiLeaks on May 15th, not only did Mr. Rich say he appreciated that Rod had done and the new information that he got, but asked to add to the story, Butowski continued. 9 hours later, the only thing that changed was Brad Bowman's Democratic crisis management person. That's all that happened. In summary, Brad Bowman, professional Democratic Party PR and crisis management player, and Ed Butowski, Texas businessman, both did interviews with WorldNet Daily. Bowman, who will not say who he is paid by, claims that he was contacted by two of Seth Rich's friends who were working for the DNC and asked to help assist with the family because they were being inundated with public questioning. He claims that the family doesn't like Rod Wheeler investigating into the WikiLeaks connections. Ed Butowski, Texas businessman, claims that the Rich family asked him to make Jack Berkman go away. If you recall, Berkman is the Republican lobbyist who we discussed earlier, saying that Berkman keeps making up claims and claiming he represents the family when he doesn't. And Butowski also said that Bowman was hired and paid for by the DNC, something we haven't had any proof of who pays Bowman. We just know who Bowman is and what he's done in his career. That being said, let's look at... Well, before I get into that, I just wanted to add that if you look at the Unsolved Murder of Seth Rich Part 2, we discussed that Ed Butowski, the Texas businessman, has also had an ongoing tweet battle with Robin Young. Robin Young was a Playboy model from the 1980s who engaged in a relationship over the internet with alleged Russian hacker Guccifer 2.0. She released 15 pages of documents of their private direct messages, and in those documents, Guccifer told Robin Young that Seth Rich was the WikiLeaks source. Well, Robin Young has also been having a Twitter spout with Texas businessman Ed Butowski, in which she claims that Ed threatened that she needs to go away, that she was impeding in his investigation, and that he illegally recorded her phone calls. Ed Butowski tweeted back out a Texas law stating that only one-party consent is needed for recording phone calls in Texas. So that's just also another strange backdrop of all the questionable characters that have injected themselves into the Seth Rich murder investigation. With that being said, let's take a look at one final interview, this by Rod Wheeler, where he backtracked a bit on his initial claims between the Seth Rich connections to WikiLeaks when he did an interview with Sean Hannity just a few days after the initial story broke.
I guess my question is, when you look at the timeline of this, and 12 days after he was killed, it shows up on WikiLeaks, what did you discover in terms of the contacts with WikiLeaks?
Right. Well, that's an excellent question. And let me clear that up right now, exactly what it was that I found. Now, I have never seen the emails myself directly. I haven't even seen the computer that Seth Rich used. Here's the problem with all of this. I don't even know where the computer is. I checked with the police department. They said they don't know where the computer is. And the FBI, they say they don't have the computer. Now, where did this information come from in terms of knowing or believing, I should say, that Seth Rich could have been in communications with WikiLeaks? There was a federal investigator that was involved on the inside of the case, a person that's very credible. And I'll tell you, let me just say this, Sean. I don't like to suggest things without saying the person's name. But I can't say the person's name because that person would be thrown under the bus. And I can't do that. But this person, we checked him out. We have to check him out. Very credible. He said he laid eyes on the computer and he laid eyes on the case file. And he came across very credible. When you look at that with the totality of everything else that I found in this case, it's very consistent for a person with my experience to begin to think, well, perhaps there were some email communications between Seth and WikiLeaks. Every time I talk with the police department, though, Sean, every time I talk to the police department about the WikiLeaks or the emails, it's automatically shut down. That discussion is automatically shut down.
Well, so we don't know for sure if the FBI or if the D.C. police have any access to these forensics, these emails?
Right.
We don't know. We actually have a statement from the FBI telling us to contact the D.C. police. The D.C. police says contact the FBI. Now, which is it? If this is just a murder investigation, first of all, why would the FBI be involved? The only reason the FBI will be involved, just so that the viewers understand, is if this has some degree of national exposure, meaning because maybe it is related to the DNC, and we don't know that. We don't know that for sure. It could have been a botched robbery. But my point is this, Sean, and I've been investigating murders for a while. You have to look at every possibility. You can't just look at one thing and say, well, that has to be it.
Have you ever seen a lot of robberies, which is how they've been looking into this case, where the person has their wallet and their watch after they've been shot and killed in the back?
No, I haven't. Now, that's not to say that that could not happen. But here's the thing, and this is so important. There's been a $125,000 reward out for information pertaining to the death of Seth Rich. Not one person has come forward. Here's one other thing that's going to be startling, and I'm just going to say this right now. I reached out to the police department way back in March when the family first hired me, right, to get involved. I didn't hear anything from the police department for 2 to 3 days. Guess what I learned yesterday from the family of Seth Rich? The police department did not call me back because someone, a high-ranking official at the DNC, check this out, a high-ranking official at the DNC, when I called the police department, they got that information and called the Rich family wanting to know why was I snooping around.
Wouldn't that explain how is it possible that the DNC, when the FBI wanted to look at their computers, was able to bring in their own people? Or that the people that ended up getting immunity ended up being able to destroy their laptop computers. Is there any evidence that he might have been disgruntled at the treatment of Bernie Sanders and the unfairness, and that the fix was in to put Hillary in that position, and maybe had evidence of that?
No, I haven't seen any evidence in that regard. The only thing that I have been able to confirm is that there were some problems that Seth was having on his job at the DNC right before he was killed. And the person, listen to this, the person that called the father after I called the police to get information, that's the person that Seth was having problems with at the DNC. So, you know, connect the dots here. It's starting to all come together. So, again, let me just really quickly say this. I don't know for sure. I don't know, as a matter of fact, if the emails went out to the WikiLeaks or anybody else, but it sure appears that way.
There you have it. The 4 parties that have injected themselves into the Seth Rich murder investigation. Some would argue the parasites. We learned that Brad Bowman, a career DNC crisis management consultant, was either assigned or offered his services to the Rich family, he won't say who pays him, very early after the Seth Rich murder. We learned that Jack Berkman, a career GOP lobbyist who makes millions of dollars a year, offered $100,000 in reward money for information relating to conviction in the murder of Seth Rich. Berkman was quick to go on TV and claim that he has sources that tell him Rich discovered Russian hacking and that Rich was going to expose it, and because of that, Rich was murdered. Texas businessman Ed Butowski, who heard about the Seth Rich murder and reached out to the family. He offered to pay for a private investigator, in which he and the family contacted private investigator Rod Wheeler. Rod Wheeler is a career private investigator who has offered his services to the family, and by his claims, he has sources that say that Seth Rich was in fact a WikiLeaks source. That's all we're going to cover today. Since the Rod Wheeler bombshell claim, no matter what you think about it, there has certainly been fallout. ABC has been sent cease and desist letters. Sean Hannity has had his advertising money attacked for daring to talk about Seth Rich in the mainstream media, and he may have to leave Fox News as a result of bringing up the Seth Rich murder. That's how big the power strings are behind this case. I don't know what happened. I don't know if Seth Rich was killed in an armed robbery. I don't know 100% that he was a WikiLeaks source, although I do know that no claim WikiLeaks has ever made has been forced to be taken down by a court of law. There's a lot of he said, she said going on. There's a lot of disinformation. And often a tactic that is used is the political elite put out one piece of disinformation on purpose. And what they do is they run with that disinformation, get the public to get behind it, and then they disprove that disinformation that they actually leak in the first place. And as a result of that, they say, oh, the whole thing is debunked. And they do this in a lot of different areas, but you really have to dig deep to understand how that works. I just want to report the facts. I laid them out. You now know the parties involved in the murder of Seth Rich investigation. Remember, never be afraid to speak truth to power.